Welcome, Team OnCore. We've got an exciting guest here on our podcast, Mr. David Shultz. Prior to founding NextLinks, Shultz spent more than 2 decades as an electrical engineer and operations executive at Bentley Nevada Corporation and subsequently General Electric. As an aviation electronics technician in the United States Navy, Shultz discovered a knack for problem solving on the avionics systems of A-6 F-18 aircrafts. Seasoned technologist, involved in the Boeing 787 development with GE. The man does it all. He's going to make us look and feel pretty insignificant today with his mass intellect here. Mr. Shultz, how are you? Where are you calling in from?
Good morning, Steve. Calling in from Coachella Valley, Southern California, Indian Wells, home of Shots in the Night.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you on. It's fascinating to hear about your transition from electrical engineering into golf. And first question is, can you just speak to that transition point, a little bit of your background and how you got into golf and technology?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll go pretty fast, but it goes all the way back to being a child and playing golf with my grandpa, right? That's where it all starts. I think that's, anybody that is a real traditional golfer will tell you that it's the memories of being on the golf course. And, certainly you always remember your best score as well, right? So mine's a 69, by the way. Ho hum, 3 birdies, 15 pars in a match play championship. So it's pretty fun.
That's awesome.
I was just a teenager in the Navy and there was a Navy golf course. And so I played there. But, after 6 years in the Navy, solving problems, I got married and I was going to be an accountant. And my wife said, man, you solved all these problems and you have so much fun, playing with oscilloscopes and other things, why wouldn't you just keep that up? And so I agreed with her. We went to Central California and went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And that's where I got my electronic engineering degree. And so it was pretty fun because, I spent 6 years doing avionic repairs. So I understood all the test equipment and the nuances of how electronics work. And then to go get your degree after you've had all that experience, it sort of reinforces, your practical experience with the theoretical experience instead of the opposite way, which is the way most people, learn is they get the theoretical and then they go out in the world and get the practical. So that was pretty neat. I ended up finished first in my class, which, I barely graduated high school because I just wasn't interested. I've always been one of those characters that if I can't be passionate about something, I just can't make myself commit, right? And that's sort of been the story of my life. I was always looking for something exciting. So I had this love for golf, and then I went and, worked for a vibration monitoring company. I actually was in Buffalo quite a bit. We had a service team there. And then I saw the emergence of Topgolf. They've been around for 20 years, but as a guy outside the golf industry, I was just studying and watching trends. And about 2014, all of a sudden they started building like 8 venues a year at 25 million a pop, right? And you can't ignore that. And I'm like, wow, that's gonna change the world, right? Everybody's gonna look at golf differently. And so it was that awareness of what a new model was going to do for the culture of golf, not as much for the traditional golfer as for the non-golfer, right? And when you think about the dynamics of, demographics and just being active in golf, it's like 10% of the world has even experienced golf and 90% haven't, but they've all, played putt-putt and these other games. And there's just such a huge, I think that's the biggest thing that hit me right away is in my research was there's just such a huge gap for the non-golfer between, the experience those of us that golf, have on a golf course and what they've ever experienced in their life. And I thought, wow, this is the time to start thinking about, how to morph the game, how to change the game a little bit. And so I really got, tickled by the sporting aspect of it. And after 6 months of feasibility study, I couldn't figure out any reason why, my thought process was wrong. And and I was in this other career, and I just couldn't, I finally had something I was really passionate about, and I wanted to pursue it. And I, managed to, get the courage to quit my job and start a company, hire people, and just begin the trek. And it's all been about, and still is about, creating an alternative format for real competition away from the golf course, right? So now you can please the golfer, right? So us golfers that don't have 5 hours, right? That was one of my aha moments. I really did have that big aha moment. It was actually my son's 21st birthday, and he wanted to go golfing because he's got the bug like me. So we went to Carmel, and it was beautiful and sunny, and he's a senior in college, and he shoots, like 75, and I shot like 95. And I just said, it's just not fair that, you're in college and you work at a golf course, and now your game's all good. And here I am in the corporate world working all the time, and I never get to go out on the golf course. And I had actually started playing a lot of tennis because I was a competitive tennis player as a kid. And I said, why can't golf be more like tennis? Right. And if you let that sit for a minute, I don't mean why can the game of golf be more like the game of tennis, but in terms of structure, right? That's what even though I like golf more, I was choosing tennis. So why is that? And so I set out to create an alternative sport, that would be like golf, that would use all the skills of golf, and but take less time, and be more social and be more welcoming for newcomers. And so that once I got that in my head, I said I got to build a product that does all that, and that's the journey we're on.
So, so I had the pleasure of reading your 25-page manifesto there, and help us understand the early evolution of your product. I know you did mention the tennis court size indoor golfing environment, and it seemed like you were really bent on tackling that indoor simulator environment, with the pitfalls being when you get around the greens in a simulator, the chipping experience, the putting experience is really lacking. And granted, the simulators probably since you wrote that have evolved, and there are some companies looking at doing some things around the putting when you're in an indoor simulator golf environment. And I don't know of too many doing, looking at the chipping component, but I was kind of fascinated by that, having just golfed in a simulator, Foresight, top of the line simulator. That whole chipping and putting experience really seemed lacking. So help us understand, where that vision stands today, and how you see that evolving, and what you've been doing currently.
Yeah, so I mean, that's where I started. Like I told you, I was telling you before our call, before you start any project in, a product development cycle, you spend a lot of time doing what they call a feasibility study. And so my initial idea, I'd already been a golfer, and I'd already played in simulator screens. And that was my thought was, wow, when I'm swinging my driver in one of those things, I almost get like the same kind of joy I get when I smash my driver down, the fairway. Not the same, but computer technology at least, makes you feel pretty good. Um, but a couple of problems that I was aware of already before I even got started, which is, when you start thinking about creating a sport, you can't have any glitches, right? So one of the things in simulators historically that has been corrected quite a bit is just you put your ball on the tee and you swing it and you hit it down the fairway, but it doesn't register in the computer, when you hit the ball. And so to me, that was like a fatal flaw, right? So that was the first thing I was really focused on is can you get a simulator technology that doesn't miss anything? Because I can't imagine you and I are playing for money, and that happens, late in our game after we'd already committed a couple hours of sweat to it,
Sure.
and the whole experience will feel, unsatisfying, right? No matter what the result, because it's just not the same when it when natural beauty or the nature doesn't take care of it.
Sure.
So I called a bunch of people. The first guy I actually talked to, I mean, great simulator companies out there. The first guy I talked to was a guy named Bill Bales, who is sort of the father of the simulator industry. He started About Golf, and About Golf is a high-end home simulator. Now they're expanding into software, right? So when simulators started, it wasn't as much about the user interface, the experience, within the simulator for the golfer. It was about giving golfers a place to hone their game when they couldn't get on the golf course, right? And then of course a dream of making it, we can just replace golf with a simulator. Um, so Bill told me, right away, he said, of course we've talked about this a million times, right? Um, and he said the problem is there's this thing we call suspension of disbelief, right? When you get in the simulator, you get into this other world, this alternate reality. And in the act of kind of leaving the simulator to go putt, which is what we were talking about, or to go chip, it takes you out of that suspended disbelief and kind of makes the experience not as full and rich. And so that made sense to me, right? So you got companies out there, they're doing the simulator stuff, they've got a problem with the short game, but it's not really their focus. They're focused on, being able to replicate full swing shots and make the traditional golfer's experience better. And that's not where my head was at. So, right. So I'm just taking all this input and so talked more and more and more. And it was just clear that you could use a simulator for replicating a full swing shot, but you can't use a simulator for replicating a touch shot. The first time I took my first investor to a simulator was in Reno, and he'd never been in one before, right? He's a very high net worth guy. I'm trying to talk him into sponsoring my business. So we go to Reno, and at the Hilton there, they had an indoor golf center, and we played. And in the middle of our round, as we were playing, when he got to one of his touch shots, he actually turned around the opposite way instead of looking into the simulator screen. He had like a 30-yard shot, and he physically turned 180 degrees so that he could see the perspective of the larger venue, and he could picture in his mind what's 30 yards. And then he turned back around and hit his shot. And I said, Ed, there it is, right? That's the problem.
Right.
It's visualization.
Yeah.
So he got it. And that's how I got my first guy to come in and sponsor me. And then, I thought, I'm just a problem solver, right? Now I'm an entrepreneur and all this other stuff. But at the beginning of this, it was just, I'm passionate about something new. I want to make it my life. How do I go about it? And the easiest way is to partner up with people that are already close to doing what you want to do. So I think I scared a lot of people because I just wanted to go get a job, right? I had this high corporate level job, but it was in the wrong industry. It wasn't in the one that I cared about. And so I just wanted to go get another high level corporate job, but I wanted to be, doing what I want to do. And so I started talking to the simulator companies about, that. And then I realized that wasn't going to happen. And then also I realized they just didn't really care that much about solving the problem I cared about. And so I said, I got to go out and solve that problem myself. So this is still the situation today with the simulators, right? Of course, you've got Full Swing, who's another great company. They're all great companies. Full Swing bought a company that does greens. That's what I thought was really strange. Here I was quitting my job and I'm doing all my research. And here's a simulator company buying a company that can replicate green contours, right? Mechanical stuff underneath it, create any break you want. I'm like, yeah, they're totally all over this. They see the problem and they want to fix it. But the mindset of people solving problems in the golf industry is about solving problems for people in the golf industry. And I'm solving problems for people that have never golfed before. And so we just weren't connected, right? And the reason I bring that up is when you talk about replicating contours, that's something that a golfer can really appreciate. It's something a non-golfer has no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
And so why are you doing that in the first place? You're doing it to create enough variety, enough variation in an experience that isn't big enough, right? So I got to create all these different breaks, and that was sort of the idea the simulator companies had. And when you talk to people, you get to the short game element of the simulator, and let's say you have a 15-foot putt left. Well, there's all kinds of physical differences, between that 15 foot and every other 15-foot putt you've had. It's 4 feet above the hole, it's 2 feet under the hole, it breaks right to left, it breaks left to right. How do you replicate all that stuff? That's where people go to. And the answer is you could do it, but it's kind of hard to do. And why do you really want to do it? You want to do it to create this variation in the experience. And so I got this idea about, well, it's not about the exact replication of the shot, right? I'm not going to remember, when I have this 15-foot putt left at the end of my simulator experience, I'm not going to remember that it was exactly 4.5 inches above and breaks right to left. I'm going to remember if it was kind of a difficult putt. Did it break? And so what if you could just map level of difficulty to level of difficulty? So instead of having a million different variations of putts you have to recreate, you have 100, right? That's still a lot of different variations.
Sure.
And then, so that seemed like, I actually modeled these moving greens, and I was trying to get a job for Full Swing, right? So I was driving down to San Diego saying, hey, will you hire me? And then I realized they were on this other lane where they're still trying to, they were convinced that replicating the terrain was the way to go. So again, all right, you're solving a problem your way. You got to keep grinding your own story. So anyway, the only question in my mind was, if you have a contoured surface, that's complex, right? It has uphill, it has downhill, it has side, it has everything you want on it. The only question was, how do you take advantage of all that complexity? And the answer I came up with is, instead of moving the green under your feet, move the player around the green, and so how do you do that? I'm like, well, how about a beam of light? And then I thought of the nightclub spotlights that you go out dancing and they're on gimbals. I'm like, well, those things could point beams of light anywhere you want them to. And so that was kind of it, is how, the nature, we're selling putting only games now, right? Because the nature of product development, you find your way into the market. But the reason we have a putting only experience is because we were trying to figure out how to, bring people out of the simulator experience onto a putting green. And so the other big issue is, what's the right size of the putting green, right? Too small, too big. There's a lot of money in this stuff. You're trying to replicate things for business people that like to make money, and it's all about, dollars per square foot. So, what's the right physical size? So, I mean, I probably spent 6 months, Steve, where I didn't take a footstep without counting, right? I'm looking between here and that light pole. How far is that? Between here and, the kitchen, how far is that? Is that a big enough putt? Is that a small enough putt? So anyway, it turns out that the minimum size that's ideal is about half of a tennis court, is what we concluded. So if you think about the length of a tennis court, that's about 70 feet. Think about putting a putt from the baseline to the baseline of a tennis court. Long putt, right?
Yep.
So now take the singles lane, right? So half and half. So think of that as a putting lane. Now you can kind of visualize that, right? The singles part of a tennis court,
Yep.
baseline to baseline.
Yep.
That is to me the minimum viable perfect size. Now people are probably going, yeah, that's still pretty big, right? And it is. That's what we call a double zone, because when you start installing these things in commercial applications, you got to monetize them the same way they monetize a hitting bay, which is, people hang out, have a good time together. Some people are playing the game, some people are just heckling and having fun. And so that minimum size is half again, right? So now you're talking about the distance from the baseline to the net, and half of that. Well, that's room for about 6 or 8 people to hang out and have a really good time. And when you're talking about the non-golfer, they're not competitive. So having a 30-foot putt, a 20-foot putt, those are great putts, right? When you start a non-golfer out, like we have different levels of competition, and the beginner level, you never really have a putt that's more than 5 feet. So anyway, that was like, when you really think about combining the simulator experience and the putting, which is what we've been talking about, you got to make the putting experience. That was the problem I have today, even still, with the simulator companies, as we're getting to know each other better, but they still think of it as just a way to finish their game, right? And I think of it as 60% of the game of golf. the putting only. And so we just think about it differently, right? So to me, they're equal partners. They're not a means to an end.
So at a facility like Indian Wells, or your facility there in Mesa, the Revelry, help me understand, help listeners understand. You've got the laser beams, coming down on, like just like at a hockey game, right onto the ice.
Yep.
So they move. You putt to the light. How does the system register when you make a putt, or is that a
Nope.
self kind of registered score?
It's self-registered for now, right? Remember, if I have my druthers, this is what I'll be doing until I'm dead. So I imagine one day, they'll be quite, if you read that in my manifesto, right? It's what got me really excited is what they call runway in the product development, right? You've got a new product, a new idea, how far can you take this thing, in terms of new features and new additions, and it's just endless. But there's a lot of, like, when we were at the PGA show a few years ago, like, some of the people found, we brought a little demo, where you could see the spotlights coming down and understand the mechanics of the technology on a field that wasn't big enough, right? We didn't have enough money to go there with a tennis court size game.
Sure.
And you know, every one of you know, these 72-foot lanes, which is what I'll talk about. Just remember that's a double zone, right? But there's 10 cups. So, over time you decide what you're going to do. So at Indian Wells, they already had a green, and you can buy just our putting zone technology, which creates these games. So there's an iPad interface to the game.
Okay.
So you've got 10 different games you can play, and you push a button on the iPad to choose which game you're going to play, and then everything else is automated except for once you get your score, you got to go back to the iPad and press a button to toggle your score.
Okay.
So you're not typing in your score, right? There's we have like 150,000 lines of software code now that between the user interface and the green mapping technology. But there's 2 spotlights in the game. There's actually 3 now, because we want to have 2-player games, right? If you think about the light beams as being a tee box, momentary tee box for you, tells you where to go, tells you where to put your ball.
Sure.
And so now we have 2 of those for each one of these zones, so that you and I can be playing together. You could be setting up your putt, I could be setting up my putt in a different place, and then we're playing in just like, as if we landed on the green together in traditional golf.
So
The third light shines over the cup, Steve. So that's how you know where to go to. So one of the things we noticed in Phoenix, we thought we bought all these flag sticks, and grass is really pretty, but it's not as pretty when you litter it with, because we're putting a higher density of cups than you would have on a traditional golf course. And so when you start putting all these flag sticks in, right, it looks like acupuncture. So get rid of all the flag sticks. You don't need them, because our technology knows where all the cups are already.
And that works. Like, I know it's kind of a flex indoor outdoor space. You got the big canopy overhead. Obviously at night, the lights are really bright. Now in the daytime, when you've got the sun kind of coming through, the sides, the open air, are the lights still pretty visible?
Yeah, so it depends on which game you're playing. And so that's what's kind of fun about, this whole journey is what I call the fun games aren't as vivid, right? The dart boards and the beer pong boards and the things that people that are out there just to have a good time, and goof around love, those aren't quite as good during the daytime.
Sure.
But that audience doesn't exist in the daytime either.
Right.
That's a nighttime audience.
Sure.
So the daytime audience are people that actually want to compete. And remember, that's what we talked about. This is all for me about creating an alternative competitive sport. And so, we talked about the simulator connection and how we got to the putting green. What we discovered through our Indian Wells opportunity, the city of Indian Wells came to our lab where we spent a couple of years designing, and we showed them the integration, right? We already designed this, interface between the simulator and a putting green. And they said, we don't really care about that simulator. We've got these 7 outdoor greens that already exist that nobody ever uses. And our, our mission here is to go, start converting those into money. And they said, we don't even care about the daytime. We'll get back to the daytime. It's a big deal. It's all about competing in the daytime, right? That's how you fill up the volume, right? You
Sure.
and I will go, you and I will go play tennis in the day, and we'll play tennis at night, and we'll socialize and have fun, but it doesn't matter. So the lights are plenty bright as long as you have a canopy cover is the answer, even in the daylight.
Okay.
The intensity of the lights, but for a point and shoot perspective, right? So the beam of light comes down. These things are pretty intense. You can definitely see, easily where to put your ball, and you can see easily, where your destination cup is, even in the pure daylight. We've got one game we call the NextLinks Challenge. Well, the NextLinks Challenge is the game you play in the simulator without the simulator.
Okay.
And what's really neat about it is you only on each of these areas, right? So this 72-foot long court we're talking about, we've got a game that's a 9-hole game, so let's think of it like a real golf experience for a minute, right? If you're playing real golf, you're gonna have typically 2 par threes, 2 par fives, and 5 par fours on a 9-hole experience, right? Just sort of standard track. And so when you play the NextLinks version of that game, you're going to have 2 par threes, right? 50, 60-foot putts that are difficult.
Right.
You're going to have 2 par ones that are, 7 to 15 foot, putts without a whole lot of break to them that you feel like you should make. And then you're going to have 5 par twos with, 15 to 25 foot putts. What people don't realize, and it is kind of one of the ahas, is you're playing the same 9 holes every time you play the NextLinks Challenge, right? So because the beam of light knows where the beam of light is going, and we've already walked that course and said, what are the most amazing 9 putts we can find on this, dramatically contoured playing field?
Right.
And so it's like when you and I are getting ready for the match and you're playing on the practice putting green, and you're picking the shots and playing skins with your buddy. We've just turned that into a full game. But the part people don't realize is that this repeatability, right? That's what golf is all about. You go out and you play your favorite golf course. You're always standing on the same tee box. You're always playing to the same green. Yeah, the flag sticks in a different place. You always remember your best score. Well, NextLinks Challenge has that same effect, right? You always remember your best score, and you're always playing the same track every time you play on that particular course, right? Between course to course, of course, the 9 putts can be different. They can also be the same if you
Right.
think about that, right? So, one of the things we've learned how to do over the years is actually shape the contours by machining dense foam in from blocks and then putting them all together into a surface. And so now we can replicate, our courses from one location to another and create any contours we want.
Which opens up some cool, virtual gaming kind of competitive things if you eventually franchise these facilities out. Help us understand for the golfers listening who certainly have had putting contests, with their buddies. Maybe it's a 9-hole match on their local putting green, at their local course. I certainly have a lot of good memories as a kid, playing it, in those, and it sharpened my skills when I went out onto the course and played. For the golfers, how does your experience compare to that in terms of they may know, be familiar with, competing against their buddies on their local putting green?
Well, if you're lucky and you get to go play at a round of golf where you spend, $75 or $150, you're playing on greens that are different than if you're playing at a municipal course, where you paid $5. So our greens are reminiscent of the former, right? So I knew as a golfer what it feels like, that I call it, you just feel special when you're in a special place playing a special game. And if you're rolling greens on a, a green that's 11 or 11 and a half or 12 on the stimp meter, and then they're pure, no bumps, there's just nothing like that, right? You
Sure.
barely touch the ball and you just watch it track. And that's what you experience on greens that we design and we manufacture. So we built them in the lab to make sure we could replicate all that, right? There was, layers of foam and pad and like, what is this surface that just makes you feel good, like you paid $100 around to play? So that's what we're able to bring to everybody, which is kind of neat, right? So, the first time a non-golfer that's never golfed before shows up and plays our game, the best analogy I can give you is just a few weeks ago in Phoenix. That's an area where a lot of people have never golfed before come to this venue and they play our putting game. And I'm just watching them, right? I call it bursts of joyful energy, right? Because when people are together dropping putts, you just hear all these, outbursts of fun and laughter. But I go around, I ask people, right? I'm a scientist, right? So I just they don't know I invented it. And, hey, what do you think of this?
Right.
And the guy goes, oh, I got to tell you the other story too. But the guy goes to me, he goes, this is like stand-up billiards.
Hmm.
He,
Okay.
he'd never golfed before, right? He didn't relate to a putter. He didn't relate to any of it other than he related the way the ball rolled on the green to the way a billiard ball rolls on a billiard table. And
Sure.
the kind of touch you need with the cue stick to a billiard ball, he related that same touch as he was trying to, make a putt. We have one of our games is called shuffleboard. Just to give you an idea of the non-golfers that show up, I had somebody walk up to me and say, "Do I use this stick like a mallet? Like on shuffleboard, you push
Sure.
it's kind of like a basket, and you push the puck down and it slides. So instead of actually doing the putting stroke, they thought during shuffleboard that they needed to kind of get down and sort of use the head of the putter to kind of push the ball down instead of
Yeah.
stroke it, like a shuffleboard mallet. You would think that would be a really silly question, but it's not. You're introducing a sport that so many people, we take it for granted as golfers. Um, there's so many people in the world that have just never ever experienced that, and that, that's what's special about the market today is you know Top Golf, has 63 $25 million venues in the marketplace, most of them in the US. And the impact of that is cultural awareness from the non-golfer. And that cultural awareness is changing the perception of golf, right? So when I started this and I talked to a non-golfer about what I was doing, like as soon as I used the word golf, I could almost see them like go into a different place. Like, okay, there, I just lost my entire conversation because I just said the word, right?
Yeah.
Here we are 6 years later, and I say the word, and they half of them being, oh, like that Top Golf, right? And I'm like,
Yeah. It's a good point.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
but my mission, our mission is to take that model now and reflect a new kind of a sport. That's why we had to figure out how to design greens that can be, that can replicate each other. And so, we're working our way into the market, and we're dangerously close to being dangerous now. But it hasn't been easy. And what sustains me is this knowledge of where the market is going, what the world's going to look like in a few years. So
Now, some of your early concepts had this notion of a rearranged golf course. I pictured a Top Golf type environment, but with a variety of different greens. And I believed it was more for kind of 100 yards and in, where you'd hit into a simulator your drives, and then you could turn around in kind of like a big domed indoor experience, or semi-indoor, semi-outdoor
mhm.
play, more of a traditional round of golf, if you will, than say a Top Golf, which has, you know, gamified the driving range, but it's it doesn't necessarily resemble a golf course, right?
Yep.
So do you still see that as a viable concept, or have you shifted away from that kind of idea?
No, so you said 100 yards in it, and you remember I told you I used to pace all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so when I started this, every time I golf, I would also, everybody in the group, I would measure their shots to try and understand where's that transition point, right? Where do you have to leave the simulator? What do you have to play into the green the real way in order to maximize the impact of that part of it? And it turned out that like from 60 yards and in, like that was, once you're a golfer, once you already know how to golf, 60% of your shots are from 60 yards and in. And then I noticed that there was really a dead spot, between 60 and 40 yards where hardly anybody ever ended up in that zone. And I'm like, yeah, there's a few shots in there, but not worth adding another 20 yards to this potential playing field. So what I came up with is 40 yards and in is
Right.
if you can play 40 yards and in real life,
Yep.
and 40 yards and out in a simulator, you've got yourself a pretty powerful sport.
Right. That's the
So
next, is that the next evolution of NextLinks and
yeah, I mean, so
revelry and
we're doing it now. I mean, I shared with you, right? So now what's happening is we're starting to get opportunities to disrupt people that want to buy a real, they don't understand that we have something new, right? So they're looking for a Top Golf or a Top Golf clone, right? So now, just like simulators, there's 5 different companies that do the same thing Top Golf does.
right.
And so there's developers that are developing pads and planning, big complexes around an anchor of that size. And so that anchor footprint, that lot that they're aligning, right? So the one we're looking at right now is a 23-acre greenfield project. And the first thing they're going to do is put the golf entertainment center up, and then they're going to build everything else around that because it's the
Sure.
anchor. And they've got like 8 acres allocated, right? Because you have to have the big outfield for the driving range. And so a guy I've been getting to know named Augustine Pisa is starting to get a reputation on his own. He's an award-winning horizontal, golf design architect. And his focus has been sort of short game stuff, a little bit like what Tiger's doing, and he's got some concepts that are really cool. And so anyway, so he's in the luxury market, and he's got, reps all over the world. And so one of his reps called him, just at the beginning of December and said, hey, can you do entertainment, as well? And he and I had been talking about collaborating, on something. And so he calls me and he says, yeah, I got this question. And, I knew you could do this. So I just said, yeah, of course we can do this. Right. And then he picked up the phone and he called me and we started talking about it. And so, what we're doing now is that led pretty quickly to a collaboration between, a horizontal traditional design architect of golf, right? When I first started this, I got to know the Robert Trent Jones family, and because I knew I needed this expertise in golf design, as part of this world. And so Augie, the timing was, I was early in my journey, right? And working with these guys that are already established, we had a great relationship, but we weren't able to advance the ball because I just, mostly on my end, right? I didn't have enough capitalization. I couldn't really do everything I wanted to do. But I always knew I wanted to work with an architect. And so, I got to know Augie and over the last couple of years. And then this opportunity came up and I said, yeah, but they, as I was talking to the customer, I said, they really want, they're expecting this golf entertainment center. And that may still be what they want, right? I'm not saying that's not what they want right now. But I said, I know, so we actually got him a quote for a golf center from one of the competitors because, why not?
Sure.
Try and help it out. And I know you guys are doing that too with OnCore and stuff like that. So anyway, big pad. And I told Augie, I said, we got to do the building. I have this old design, reality golf where you could play all the short game. And, I said, I just want to replace all the long game with simulator screens and really, maximize the short game.
Yeah.
And put a roof over it. And so he said, let's do it, let's do it. And I said, all right, let's do it. And so he's got, he's a Spanish guy and he's got some friends in Spain that are vertical architects, building designers. They're young like you. and a couple of brothers, Victor and Sergio Sanz, Sanz, and so I pull up their website and I'm just blown away by their creativity. And so now we're all three together. We've signed an agreement, and we're gonna design and collaborate on a full solution that basically is a building designed to activate my sport, our which also is entertainment. So our technology that runs these venues, it goes beyond just these putting games and the simulator integration, right? We're writing software to interface with the F&B people and that kind of stuff. So we're building a physical building concept around our current state of our technology, and then Augie does all this beautiful, golf course design. And so our final product that we're going to propose is probably only going to take 2 or 3 acres versus the 8 that they've got allocated. I said, Augie, you ought to be prepared to, design a full short course to go on that extra 5 so that, we fill up that whole footprint. And so, I don't know if we'll win that, but that was a big part of my thinking years ago was, the inefficiency of the driving range model. And if you really could replace the driving component with screen, sorry about that. If you really could replace the driving component with screen golf, and that would be satisfying, there's a lot of economic benefit to doing that. And that's
Sure.
what we're starting to, now we're starting to get serious traction, because I knew as these models progressed that developers, they think years ahead, years in advance. I'm like, what I want to be able to do is get in there in the 11th hour when somebody's ready to go. They just haven't quite picked their solution provider, and be able to go in there. You call it, form, fit, function replacement, right? So that's, long story short, we're designing a fit replacement for the driving range model, and we're doing it with Augustine Pisa and Sands Pond.
So locally here, shouldn't say locally, a few hours down the thruway, we've got Turning Stone. They've got a big dome. They had tennis courts in there, and they ripped them out a few years ago and put in an indoor chipping short game area. Nice, it's turf, and they've got the simulated bunkers and a really, really nice facility. I'm thinking our listeners can kind of conceptualize that image. Maybe they've got one in their particular city. So with this collaboration with these architects, you've got your simulator, you hit your drive, say, and then when you're 40 yards and out, are you turning around and chipping onto a into a artificial turf like type green, and then are you going up and putting? Help us kind of understand visually what you would like to do in a perfect world.
So I think the first thing to help people realize just how significant these two separate games are, right? So Ben Hogan has a famous quote about golf, right? And it's really, golf is something like, it's 2 different sports, one played in the air and one played on the ground.
Sure.
And the one played on the ground hasn't gotten a lot of attention, right?
Right.
From the developing world, the world of developers. And so these really are 2 different games. As the testament to that is the fact that we were able to get into the market, with only the putting side of the equation, ready for market.
Sure.
And so the answer is yes, you do that, but you don't necessarily do it at the same time you're playing the long game. So let's say you want to play 18 holes in an environment like that. You would play all 18 perhaps of your front end shots.
Sure.
And then all that gets stored in our software, your results. So, hole 1, you have a 25-foot putt downhill. Hole 2, you got a 20-yard chip, right? So all that just gets stored off, and then you can come back later and go play all 18 of your, the other half of the game. But in that case, remember I told you in the NextLinks challenge, you come back, you play the same course every time.
Sure.
Right? So the only difference between playing the whole game of golf and playing the NextLinks challenge is, instead of playing the same course every time like you do with the NextLinks challenge, you're playing the results of your long game every time. So your short game, the complexity of your short game, the difficulty of your short game will be unique and different every time you play it, because it's because it's a component of a larger game that we've created.
So real greens, turf greens. Just kind of help us understand for the listener who may not be familiar. They could play all their drives in the simulator, and then the software kind of your laser technology they'd turn around, walk out into an actual physical turf green or real green, and the lasers would say, okay, for hole one your drive was here, so you're going to chip from the rough, and then so they chip, and then do they go putt, or how does that all work?
Yeah, so once the beam of light comes down and tells you your tee box, right, where to put your ball, and the other beam of light comes down and shows you your destination cup, that's all you need at that point, right? We've told you, we've given you the mission,
Right.
Put your ball here and make it go in there. So then you just go play, and if it took you 3 shots, then you could either on your wristwatch or on your iPhone, you could have our app running, and it's just asking you what's your score, and there's already a bunch of numbers there. Did you get a 4 or a 3 or a 2, and you just punch a button, and
Great.
Then it captures that result.
And this would be housed in like an indoor facility, like you mentioned the trampoline parks that you see popping up around the country. You mentioned the indoor go-kart racing, as kind of some of the research you've done to look at the size and the revenue multiples, how many people can you fit? But just so our listeners know, this could be all year type indoor golf, or would you want it?
Yeah, well, and it's even better than that, Steve. And that's what gets exciting is, you asked me about the big venue, right? That's always been my challenge, and it's always the challenge of product development is, how to get into the market with products that you can sell. Right. Well, at the big scale, yeah, we can go collaborate with architects and design stuff, and we can build our own putting greens, and we can put our tech over it, right? We had to learn how to do all the stuff.
Right.
But when it all boils down to what already exists in the world, there's already a lot of people out there that know how to build putting greens, and they're real happy with the way they do it, right?
Sure.
Even though we're figuring out how to do it, there's all these turf guys out there that's what they've been doing for a living for the last 15 years. So, we know a lot of them, and now we're able to just singularity, just all alone sell our technology only, right? So you've already got your physical environment, you've already got your simulators, you just got to bring in our spotlights and our software, and you've just gamified all that. Right. That we've got 6 years of software that immediately turns, an existing space into an interactive set of games. And so we're looking at an opportunity in Dubai right now that if we take it, we have to have it done, by like early February.
Wow.
And the customer is saying, but listen to the situation. It's at an upscale hotel. They've already got a nightlife from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., all, year round. It's already got all the restaurants, and they've got 1,500 square feet of underutilized area. And we've got an agent in the market that understands the value that we can bring to that area.
Sure.
Approached the owner. The owner said, yeah, go for it. And so now these guys are saying, hey, we'll go do all the green. We'll get it all prepped for you. We'll get your electrical in place. Your places to mount your stuff. If you can just get here with your equipment and turn that 1,500 square feet into 3 putting zones. And we did
Tell them, write the check and you'll be there tomorrow.
That's what we told them. I called the light manufacturer, right? So the only real hurdle is lead time on hardware.
Yeah.
The software is already written, and it was kind of an unintended benefit when you think about the hardware we chose for the spotlights. They're entertainment lighting, and there's been a lot of development in entertainment pre-COVID. That all this event stuff, laser beams, and going out to a concert is pretty special. Well, that whole market's depressed, so there's a big surplus of inventory right now as well.
Strike while the iron's hot. Well, listen, this has been a fascinating conversation. I want to just end with, we've got a lot of listeners in the golf industry, have facilities, are certainly wanting to learn more about what you're doing, where you see the future going. How can they best get a hold of you? How can they best see what you're up to?
Yeah, so I mean that's been another challenge over the years, right? Is being able to explain and understand our business, real clearly to people that want to understand it. So I saw you downloaded our buyer's playbook last night from our website. Um, the website has evolved over the years into a bunch of different things, right? Is this a science project? Is this a company? Well, now the website is a very clear landing page. So nextlinks.com,
Okay.
NEXTLINKS. It's got our commercial installation examples. So you can kind of understand, how we're already in the market. You can see pictures and photographs and videos of both of our installations. And then you can access our what we call our buyer's playbook, which is really about a 10, 11 page document that just explains how you buy our products, right? What's our vision? How do you get involved? Sales for us is not commodity sales, it's technical sales. So what I'm realizing now is we've got a pretty good technical sales team because my team's been with me for 6 years, and
Right.
they're finally understanding how to walk a potential customer through the process. And
Sure.
it's really no different than buying a launch monitor, Steve. So to activate a putting zone, which is about 600 square feet, think again about a quarter of a tennis court, right,
Right.
from the baseline to the net, and then the singles lane.
Yep.
That's about 25 grand, and then a licensing fee, just like buying a launch monitor. So if you've already got the putting green, and you've already got electricity, and you've already got internet, and you just want to turn your venue into something a little more exciting, you can just buy our technology and take advantage of our 6 years of software development. And so, I guess I'd throw it back on you. It's always an improving process, but you went through it last night. You went to the website and then you downloaded our playbook. The nice thing is we get a record of that, right? We get your email and your phone number, and then one of us will call you back if you take the option of downloading our information. So I don't know if you read through that, but if you did it make sense to you? Did the
Yeah.
process work?
Yeah, it sure did. And granted, I've had, the pleasure of getting to know you over the years, and have been familiar with what you've been doing. So but it's great for the listeners. I encourage you, go to the website, check it out. Dave's been doing amazing things in the industry, and I'm sure your imagination and just the future of golf has been captivated by this discussion with Dave here. So check out what he's doing. Thank you for joining us and enlightening Team OnCore on all the exciting things you're doing. And we'll continue the discussion.
Yeah, no, it sounds great, Steve. It's been a pleasure watching you guys develop your business, and I'm excited to see OnCore Buffalo come together, hopefully in this year. So
Yeah, and we'll get you. You've certainly supported our golf ball technology over the years at your facilities, so we'll make sure we keep you stocked with the OnCore balls, and we'll be in touch. Thank you again.
I can't wait. I'm
All
just,
right,
like I said, I've successfully transferred from my old career to my new career, and so I'm just enjoying it. Thank you again.
fascinating. Thank you, Dave. Cheers.
Bye.